To understand what is happening right now in the skies over Tehran, you have to go back, not just weeks, but decades. Iran and the United States have been locked in a Cold War since 1979, when Iranian revolutionaries stormed the U.S. Embassy and held 66 Americans hostage for 444 days. That humiliation never fully healed. For 47 years, the relationship between Washington and Tehran has been defined by sanctions, proxy conflicts, assassination plots, and nuclear brinksmanship. The strikes follow the failure of recent indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran on Iran's nuclear program in early February 2026. Talks that themselves followed the triggering of snapback sanctions by the UK, Germany, and France in October 2025. Diplomacy had one last chance, and it failed. The US demanded Iran end all nuclear enrichment entirely. Iran refused. And that refusal, combined with Israel's behind-the-scenes lobbying, set the stage for what came next. Trump's own justification was that Iran was seeking to rebuild its nuclear program, which he said was obliterated in strikes last June. He also said Iran was developing a long-range missile capable of striking the United States. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters that Israel was already planning to attack Iran unilaterally, which would have drawn retaliatory fire on American assets across the region regardless. So, on the morning of February 28, 2026, without a congressional vote, without a formal declaration of war, the United States and Israel launched what has since been named Operation Epic Fury. On that same morning, Israel and the United States began a coordinated series of strikes against Iran, targeting the country's leadership, its security forces, its nuclear program, and its missile sites. Their stated aim was to induce regime change and eliminate the nuclear threat. The opening blow was surgical and devastating. The first wave targeted the compound known as Leadership House, and then came the news that stopped the world. On February 28, 2026, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the man who had ruled Iran with an iron fist for 30 decades, was assassinated. His daughter, son-in-law, grandchild, and daughter-in-law were also killed in the strikes. This was not a side effect. This was the point. The United States and Israel had executed a decapitation strike, a direct assault on the head of one of the most powerful theocratic regimes in modern history. Iran declared 40 days of national mourning, fired hundreds of missiles back at Israel, and a war that had been simmering for nearly half a century finally boiled over. The scale of what followed is almost incomprehensible. The U.S. struck more than 3,000 targets inside Iran in the first week alone, according to U.S. Central Command. Israel's military chief confirmed it was moving to the next phase of the war after carrying out 2,500 strikes with more than 6,000 weapons deployed. The IRGC's Malik Ashtar building in Tehran was completely destroyed. Iran's state broadcast headquarters was hit. Iran's parliament building was struck by airstrikes. Trump told reporters that just about everything had been knocked out, that Iran had no navy, no air force, no air detection, no radar. That is an extraordinary claim, but it appears to be substantially accurate. Iran did not go quietly. On the first day alone, Central Command confirmed it neutralized several hundred Iranian drone and missile strikes. By March 1, 3 U.S. service members had been killed. By March 2, that number had risen to 6, all members of the 103rd Sustainment Command based in Des Moines, Iowa. By March 5, Iran had fired over 500 ballistic missiles and nearly 2,000 drones since the war began, nearly 40% aimed at Israel and 60% at American targets across the region. Analysts noted increasing signs of missile depletion and a shift towards rationing for a longer war. And then there are the civilians. At least 1,332 civilians have been killed in Iran. Schools, hospitals, neighborhoods. Over 200 killed in Lebanon, 11 in Israel, 6 Americans dead. Among the dead, more than 160 children killed in a single strike on a girls' school. 160 children. That number has become the defining moral flashpoint of this conflict for the world. The United Nations estimates at least 330,000 people have been forcibly displaced across the Middle East. 100,000 people fled Tehran in the first 2 days alone. Just when it seemed the war might be contained, the second front opened. On March 2, Hezbollah began firing rockets and missiles at Israel, saying it was retaliation for the killing of Khamenei, an action condemned even by the Lebanese government itself. Israel launched airstrikes on southern Lebanon and South Beirut, then sent ground forces from the 91st Division into South Lebanon to establish what it called a security layer. The Lebanese Health Ministry reported nearly 300 killed. And in a moment that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago, the Lebanese government began issuing arrest warrants for Hezbollah members, one of the most dramatic political shifts in Lebanese history, forced by the weight of Israeli firepower. But the war has spread even further. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE have all been struck by Iranian drones and missiles. Dubai International Airport came under drone attack multiple times. Saudi Arabia intercepted 16 drones headed towards the Sheba oil field, one of the largest in the Middle East. An Iranian missile aimed at Turkey was shot down by a U.S. warship. A British RAF base in Cyprus was struck by an Iranian drone. Iranian weapons have now reached European Union adjacent territory. This conflict has gone global in reach. And the diplomatic irony is staggering. Iran, which spent decades building influence across the Arab world through proxies and soft power, is now watching its own neighbors line up in opposition as it fires missiles into their airports and oil fields. Back in Tehran, the constitutional vacuum is profound. Under Iran's constitution, an interim leadership council was established on March 1, consisting of President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chief Justice Mohseni Ejei, and Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi, to exercise the functions of head of state until a new supreme leader is elected. Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, has been reported as the frontrunner, but Israel bombed Iran's Assembly of Experts while it was in mid-session, actively trying to choose Iran's next leader. The audacity of that strike is almost without precedent in modern warfare. And then there is this. President Trump has publicly stated he must have a role in choosing Iran's next leader, calling Khamenei's son unacceptable. A sitting U.S. president openly declaring his intention to shape who governs a sovereign nation of 90 million people. Meanwhile, Iranian soldiers have been abandoning their positions following the decapitation strikes, according to conscripts interviewed by Iran International. The morale collapse within Iran's military is accelerating. But on the streets, the Iranian people, many of whom despise the regime, are caught between a government they don't want and a bombing campaign that is killing them. As Senator Chris Murphy warned, we are telling the Iranian people to rise up, but we have no plan to support them. What is the United States actually trying to accomplish? The White House has offered multiple, sometimes contradictory answers. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt declared that Iran's murderous terrorist leaders were paying their crimes against America, and that 47 years of tolerating state-sponsored terrorism were over.
Israeli Defense Minister Katz stated the IDF would continue to crush the regime's capabilities and create conditions for the Iranian people to overthrow it. That sounds like regime change, but the administration has carefully avoided formally committing to those words. Senator Murphy laid out the contradiction on the Senate floor with devastating clarity. Half the administration says Israel pulled us in. Others, including sometimes Trump himself, say America decided on its own. If you're not pursuing regime change, why did you assassinate the Ayatollah? And if you are, what comes after? Air power alone cannot eliminate Iran's nuclear capacity. Murphy's warning about the endgame was chilling. If the goal is not regime change and we accept new hardline Iranian leadership, that is a recipe for perpetual war, constantly bombing new sites, trillions of dollars, endless. One of the most constitutionally